Okay, thank you, Fo. And thank you very much for inviting me. It's really great to be here. Okay, so what we're going to do today is for just about half an hour, 40 minutes, we'll be chatting about what it means to be living with sexual integrity in your world, in our world. And then hopefully we'll have a time for Q&A, for questions. And I'm assuming that you girls will be coming up here to answer the questions with me. Right?
That could be very scary.
Yeah. So anyway, so now you're committed. So you've got to listen really carefully because you're going to be answering the question. Yeah. So I hope that whatever questions you have, you can be assured that I've heard all of them before. So you're probably sitting there thinking, what is this old subcontinental Sri Lankan woman got to tell us about sex? So very briefly, let me tell you a little bit about my background. I went to medical school in Sri Lanka, taught in the Faculty of Medicine in Sri Lanka. And then I did my postgraduate study in Hawaii. That's where I got into sex. It's a great place to get into sex, Hawaii. It was kind of late because I was already married with a 3-year-old son. And then in Hawaii, I was studying sexual health and sexology with one of my professors at that time was one of the world's best known people in the area of gender. And gender issues is another area that's very close to my heart, and I do a lot of work and writing in that area also. So although we won't be talking a lot about gender issues, I'm more than happy to take questions on that area. So after that, I went back to Sri Lanka, and for 6 years, I was the only sex therapist in the country, busy years with 20 million population. And 26 years ago, we migrated to Australia, and I have been an academic with the University of Sydney for 23 years. 4 years ago, I retired from the University of Sydney with the purpose of retirement, doing what I have been passionate about from the time I was a young girl, and that is creative writing. So I went for courses on creative writing, but God had other ideas for my life. So when I retired, I was invited to write some books with Anglican publications, and I'll tell you about the books. They're all available in Coorong. And so I've been writing and also doing speaking. Over the last 2 days, I've been speaking. I'm speaking again Monday and Tuesday in other places. So and then I'm going off to Cairns the following weekend. So what we're going to talk about today is sexuality and living with sexual integrity. So to lay a foundation, what is sexuality? Thinking about it for a moment, right? What is sexuality? What is sex? Quick word. What do you think sex is? They're very quiet.
Intercourse.
Good girl.
Come on, you guys.
Okay, they're shy, I mean, but they're thinking it. Sex is basically very much core to what we are, our being. When we were created in the image of God, right there, we clearly told we are created male and female. So we are created embodied as male and female. We are created sexual. Right from the beginning of Genesis. And therefore, our sexuality encompasses everything. It encompasses our sexual identity in terms of our genitals. It encompasses the way we feel as to am I male, am I a female. It encompasses how we behave, how we sit, our sex roles, and our erotic attractions. In other words, am I erotically attracted to male or female? All these things are packaged together in sexuality. And then it is expressed in our thoughts and our fantasies, our beliefs, our attitudes. But it is also influenced by everything that surrounds us. And we need to understand this. The whole concept of sexuality is not just intercourse, although it is part of it, but it is everything that we are and we be and we believe, apart from the fact that we are as a body, male or female. Now, sexual integrity, we are told in our culture today, is a belief that is unique to each individual based on that person's backgrounds and values. I want to listen to this. We are told that it is an individual choice, and nobody can tell or influence you in terms of what your personal integrity should be. We told, you can be honest and transparent and reveal who you are to other people, your desires. Can you see what we are hearing there? It's all about me, my desires, my individual decisions. And don't you try to tell me how I set my levels of integrity. It is what I believe is right and what I believe is right for me. There is no longer an objective truth. This is the world we live in. It is me and what I think is right, and that is what I will do, as long as I don't cause you too much of harm. That is the world we live in. Truth, objective truth, is no longer something that can be spoken about. You see, and what does then God of the Bible have to say about this? The world will tell you that God is basically some kind of a cosmic killjoy. And the Bible, isn't it just a old set of rules? What has it got to say for you, the enlightened young people of the 21st millennium? And Christians, for goodness sake, look at the kind of things they're telling the world to do. They're honestly saying that, people should stay abstinent till they get married. Oh, wow, that's so dangerous, I've been told. How dare I say that to young people? And that God created male and female, and that's a complementary, meant for each other. That is so unhealthy, I'm told. See, the God of the Bible speaks to our sexuality, but we are told that being Christian and speaking to this is anti-sex, boring, bigoted, homophobic, transphobic, intolerant, even plain evil. And if you stand on the word of God, this is what you are going to hear, because this is what the world will tell you. Next slide, thank you. So, is our society then truly happy with this? Unfortunately, they are not. So let's start off by looking a little bit at the brain, at your young brains, and looking at what your brains are telling you and why your brain is so vulnerable. Now, this is your brain. I want to talk to you a very important thing about the brain. When I went to medical school in the old days, we, with the dinosaurs, we thought the brain just sort of developed and then stopped. And then after that, it just sort of grew in size. Now we know that's not true. Our brains stay what we call neuroplastic throughout life. This means that everything that goes into your brain, whatever age you are, is going to alter how your brain develops, what attitudes, what values you feel. Now, there are two important parts of the brain I want to talk about. One of them is the green bit there, that is the deep emotional brain, the part of the brain that is involved in driving your reward system, your want, your emotions, your desire, love, and attachment. All this I want love, I'm falling in love, all those feelings. I call it the volcano brain. It erupted when you reached puberty. Think, when you suddenly thought, whoa, I'm a sexual being. That's the time it basically just erupted. And you developed, you felt different. And your parents were going, who are you? Whatever happened to my little girl or little boy? Can you bring that one back? You're kind of a real alien. You're so out of control. What is this? You wanted to be independent. You didn't want to be like your parents. You didn't want to hold mom's hand anymore when crossing the road. You could think of someone else's hand you'd much rather be holding. And so that is good, because otherwise when you're 40 years old, you'd still be cuddling up on mom's lap, and that would be most inconvenient. So you had to be independent. But that's a good thing, and you were seeking novelty, and you were seeking quick rewards. You wanted things, and you wanted it now. That's your volcano brain erupting at puberty. Now you're getting independent. the question is, who were you getting dependent on? Who were your friends? Who were your peer groups? Who were your role models? Were your role models godly young men and women like your youth leaders? Or maybe you are the youth leaders and people are looking up to you? Or were there some twerking pop star or a porn star who was your role model? Now that is your volcano brain. Now, there's another part of your brain, the cerebral cortex up here in what we call the frontal, for you bio, anyone studying bio, frontal parietal lobes. That part of the brain is what controls your, maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Maybe you should give that a little bit more thought. You've taken that picture, maybe you shouldn't press that send button right now. That part of the brain matures very slowly. You know what? Doesn't mature till you're well into your 20s, about 25. How many of you are over 25? See, we've got one mature control system here.
Oh, the pressure.
One brain. Everyone else, your control brain is still developing. So you know what happens? When you want to make a decision, your emotional reward-seeking brain will so override your decision-making self-control brain. That's so important. So guess what? When your parents or your teachers or your youth leaders or the officers in the Corps say, you are so out of control, you are. And of course, this means you need help. And that's why God gives you people like your young officer here, because she is your self-control mechanism. And your parents, your officers, your parents, your youth workers, my dear young people, you think you can move the earth, but the reality is you do need some help. So what is the lesson we learn by knowing what your brain is like? One, you are out of control and you do need some help. So please, when people say, that guy you're going out with, he's really not suited to you, just think, maybe, they lived like 40 years more than me. Maybe they've learned a little bit of wisdom. And the second thing is what I've said. Everything that goes into your brain is going to affect the wiring of your brain. So think very carefully, what are you putting into your brain? What sort of things are you putting? What internet sites are you watching? What television programs are you looking at? My dear young people, if you are watching television shows that have pornography, explicit sex in them, you are wiring your brains to accept the perverted fantasy sex of pornography. If you are watching popular television shows like Game of Thrones, you are watching porn. And if you're sitting there looking at me and thinking, well, what does she know? That's a great storyline. And that's not perverted sex. Guess what? You've already wired your brains to accept that deviant sex as normal. This is the reality. Porn rewires the circuits of your brain. Next slide. So let's move on and talk about sexual desire, falling in love, and attachment. In studying the brain, we now looking at the imaging of the brain, we can talk about 3 stages of this whole romantic process. We can talk about desire, sexual desire. We can talk about falling in love and what happens when you have sexual intimacy. Let me first talk a little bit about sexual desire. The chemistry of desire says, I want sex. It says, I want sex. What does this mean? Testosterone, which is a hormone, in that, the green bit, the emotion bit, the volcano brain starts erupting and starts telling you, I want sex, I want sex. We call it the limbic system. It's a want. Now hold that word. It says, I want sex. Doesn't matter how I get it. I can masturbate, I can fantasize, I can do anything, but I want sex. It's an appetite. Want. Now what's the world around you telling you? The world around you is telling you that desire is an irrepressible urge and you have a right to what you desire. What sort of sexual desires are you seeing around in your friends, peers, schools, unis? What sort of sexual desires are we seeing? I will have whatever I desire. So whether it be same sex, other sex, premarital sex, solo sex, then why not we stretch it a bit and say animal sex or whatever object sex? If I desire it, it's my body, my decision, I will do what I want. This is the message you're going to hear. If I desire same-sex activity, it is my right. And don't you tell me anything about the Bible's message about it. Because it's my body, my right, my decision. I want to watch pornography for entertainment. It's not, wires your brain, but it's my choice. I will do what I want. Unfortunately, the world, people, this using desire this way is proving unhealthy, and we have sufficient data to tell you now that having early sex is related with risky sexual behavior. This is early meaning teens, starting having sex in your teens, increased in sexually transmitted infections, alcohol, drug use, and dissatisfaction in marriage. And I can go on with all that. And pornography rewires your brain. What does God tell us about this? In God's pattern, desire is a gift and a blessing. Psalm 139 says, I knew you when you were knit in your mother's womb. You know, when dad's sperm, mom's ovum was sitting there and millions of dad's sperms was flying towards it or swimming towards it, and one sperm went, whoa, and the other said, aw, and then that sperm got in. At that moment, God said, that's mine. That kid is mine. Mom and dad had no idea. They were making whoopee. Mom didn't even find out till about 8 or 9 weeks after when she had a blood test. But God knew. And you are here today because Mom and Dad were making whoopee. You see, God created Adam and Eve. He created the world and he said, that's good. Then he created Adam and Eve running around naked in the Garden of Eden and said, that's very good. Created goodness of sex. God asked man and woman, Adam and Eve, to multiply and fill the earth. He wasn't telling them to do mathematics and, plant apple trees or something. He was basically telling them, have sex. Have sex. God could have made sex a really boring thing. But being a gracious God who gives us good gifts, he gave us sex as a good gift. And the Bible is very, very clear about the power of sex. If you read in Song of Songs, chapter 8, we read, love is as strong as death, its jealousy unyielding as the grave. It burns like a blazing fire, like a mighty flame. Many waters cannot quench love, rivers cannot sweep it away. That is how powerful it is. And it's meant to be that way. God created it that way. And he means it to be used in a particular purpose, in a particular situation. Next slide. So, let's talk a little bit about how we disorder our desires. These are some of the things you hear. I can feed my fantasies any way I want to. So, let me talk to you a little bit about pornography. Porn is anything that is sexually explicit and created. Can be just the next click so that we have the answers to what we are going to talk about. Is anything that is sexually explicit and created to titillate sexually. Okay, so that's the definition. Explicit meaning nudity or some activity. Now, what's the problem with porn? Why are we telling you that porn is unhealthy? Where do you see porn these days? The kind of obvious thing of on a computer with this old man, with a towel over his head, watching it while he masturbated in the dark. That's not so. Today, it's on your mobile phone. It's in the playground. The average age of first porn exposure is 11 years old. If that's the average, we have 8-year-olds watching porn. This is what we are seeing. If you look at the statistics, it says that almost 100% of young men have been exposed to porn. And I'm not saying regular porn users, but exposed to porn. And that means, young men, I'm almost certain that all of you at some time in your life would have been exposed to porn. I'm not saying you're regular users, but you would have seen it. 60 to 70% of young girls, women your age, have been exposed to pornography. This is the reality. So why are we saying this is a dangerous thing? We now know, remember neuroplasticity? We now know that what porn does is it floods your desire circuit with a sort of a super high stimulation. We haven't talked about falling in love yet, and there are other chemicals that come into your brain when you fall in love, especially a chemical called dopamine, which basically makes you dopey. And that's, the falling in love. And so testosterone, dopamine, that pathway is hijacked by high levels of stimulation. Because porn is super sex. It is a super stimulation sex. So in that hijacking of that deep emotional brain, what it does is it sets down neural pathways. So, your desire pathway was a normal one, a natural one. A normal girl is who turned you on. All of a sudden, you're getting flooded with these images, these, quite brutal sexual images. And so what happens is you get sucked into that pathway. And after a while, your brain gets numbed. So it's a numbing effect. And you want more and more, and you need even, more intense and novel stimuli. And you just can't keep away. And after a while, you want to watch even when you hate it. You know it's not good for you, and you still watch it. And what does it do? It makes your brain believe that that fantasy sex is really what it is. And after a while, a real woman or a real man doesn't do anything for you. And we now know that for boys, watching porn does what we call really, it causes their brains to see women as porn stars. Basically what happens is they begin to accept the porn values of women. I talk to young boys, 15-year-olds, who tell me, if you don't watch porn, how do we know what girls like? No girl wants to be your porn star, young man. I was in school, a mixed school, where one of the boys asked that, and the other boys started clapping. I waited till a few of them had clapped a while, and then I said, "Late girls, look at the guys who are clapping, they're the ones you don't date." Because that's the reality. Young boys' brains will be wired to accept that bodies of women want the kind of porn activity, anal sex, all the kind of, ejaculation on the face of the girl. These things boys believe are what girls actually enjoy. And we are here seeing girls come and say, our boyfriends ask us to groan like porn stars. Our boyfriends ask us to do this and that. Porn activities. And they believe that even girls enjoy violence. This is what we are seeing. And what's we seeing in girls? We are seeing girls who are accepting that if they want to be powerful, they need to make themselves porn stars. They've got to dress like porn stars. They've got to behave like porn stars. That's in some way empowerment means that you have to expose yourself, make yourself sexual. And that's what our girls, we call it the raunch culture. And we are seeing that everywhere. My dear young women, you don't have to be any man's porn star. You don't have to put yourself out there to be perved at, to be powerful. And all of you, you will be the role models to the other younger women in your cause. Wherever you are worshiping, you will be the role models. Do it. Because young people, that's what they are hearing. And of course, when it comes to couples, in marriage, porn use is destroying marriages. I work as a therapist, well, I did till December when got too much of other things to do, and almost every couple I was seeing had a current or past porn problem. Porn use destroys marriages. It doesn't increase their sex life. Basically, men, they don't desire their wife anymore because they want to only watch porn, and they get sexual dysfunctions. What about I need to do whatever I want to? Let me take a few minutes to talk about homosexuality. BDSM is bondage, discipline, and sadomasochism, basically the kind of 50 Shades of Grey sex. Wasn't it amazing how many women actually thought that reading 50 Shades of Grey was something that was, so exciting? Basically, it was about abuse. It was framing abuse of a woman as romance. It's amazing how many Christian women were reading it and going for the show, for the movie. See, we have accepted a worldview. No wonder there's like one woman a week or something killed in intimate partner violence. There was one just reported yesterday, I believe. Women who are being killed in partner violence, and we are still romanticizing it and saying, oh, it's so romantic to be beaten up by a man I love. Why is this? I will do whatever I think. It's turned into a romance. Violence has now become romantic. We have in this neuroplastic brain, when you start seeing something, you see, romance and love is a good and healthy thing God gives you. Pain and violence is something you're supposed to run away from and protect yourself. When we start blurring our boundaries, your brain gets pretty confused. That's the reality. Now let me talk to you a little bit about gender. Now that's a whole 1 hour's talk, but I'm going to give you the potted version in 2 minutes. Gender is incredibly complex. We all hear about the same-sex marriage debate and homosexuality, but basically gender is incredibly complex. Firstly, there is the gender that happens when your biology, your biological creation, how you are born. So this happens in the uterus of your mother, and depending on what the hormones and your chromosomes and things happen, you are born with male or female genitalia, external and internal. It's what the boy, the doctor picks up the baby and goes, Mrs. Jones, you are the most beautiful baby girl or boy. And sometimes 1 in 3,000 or so, the doctor picks up the baby and goes, Mrs. Jones, you have the most beautiful baby? Because you have like what we call ambiguous genitalia, intersex disorders of developmental disorder, the development. What happens? Intersex is a word that you'll remember. Intersex, not clearly developed genitalia. So when the genitalia develop like that, the brain sexing also gets confused. And we see concerns in about 1 in 3,000 babies. And that's quite a few babies who are born with intersex. So that's the biology. Then there is what we call gender identity. That is the core identity that says, I am male or I am female. Wander up to one of you and say, are you boy or girl? That's what you would say. Sometimes you might say, you know what? I really am still finding out whether I'm a male or a female. And that is the area what we call gender identity problems or gender dysphoria. That is, the true gender dysphoria is pretty uncommon. We would say that's where people go through hormones and surgery, transsexuals. The true transsexuals are in women about 1 in 11,000. In men about 1 in 11,000 and women about 1 in 30,000. That's the ones who have true gender dysphoria go through all the surgery. However, there is a very large group of people who have various mixtures of how they see themselves in terms of masculinity, femininity, and doesn't quite fit with what their biological sex is. And this group is what you would have heard as transgender. Anyone heard that word, transgendered? Transgender is an umbrella term for anyone whose gender behavior or sense of themselves isn't in keeping with their biological sex. And that's about 1 in 500 or even 1 in 300, they say. So that's the kind of people who would walk into your meetings and, be cross-dressed or, behaving as not quite as what you would expect of their biological sex. Now, how does that come back to what I need to do, whatever I want to do? Sexual, then we've talked about the biology, we talked about identity. Sexual orientation is an erotic attraction to male or female, or both, which is bisexual, or you're fluid. You can move between one or the other in any time that you wish to. Now, what do we understand about that? Let me tell you this. There is same-sex attraction. Okay, sexual orientation just means who are you oriented to. You with me so far? Same-sex attraction is what we talk about when we talk about homosexual, gay, lesbian. Listen to the word I said, attraction. Go back to what we talked about when we talked about desire. Desire is a want. The chemical happening in our emotional brain says, I want. Behavior of any type is a choice. So same-sex attraction is one thing. And the reality is that today's research tells us that for some people, the same-sex attraction can be a innate biological predisposition. Listen to what I'm saying. I'm not saying predetermination, a predisposition for some people. And depending on what happens in the environment, this predisposition can be played out in a behavior. Behavior is not the same as attraction. There's a third criteria, and that is identity. Now, there are people who are same-sex attracted who choose not to behave in same-sex behavior. There are people who actually behave same-sex who would say they're not attracted or they don't identify as gay or lesbian. Why do you think they do that? Why do you think people would have same-sex behavior? Why would you kiss a woman if you're a woman or finger another woman if you are not same-sex attracted? It's because our young people are being told, you've got to explore your sexuality. You've got to find out who you are. Explore, experiment. I've had girls say, our boyfriends are so turned on when I bash my girlfriend. It's one of the most common types of pornography boys watch is lesbian porn. And so they ask their girlfriends to behave. And so when we do research, these girls would say, yeah, I've tried it out with other women, but no, I'm not attracted and I don't identify. So these categories are very discreet. And so we need to be clear about this, that there are many people who are same-sex attracted, but still say, I will live as God has created me. The Bible is very clear. If you read Matthew 19 verse 5 or something, where Jesus was asked about divorce, he really pointed back to Genesis. And he said, have you not heard that at the beginning God created them male and female? And for this a man will leave his mother and father and go away with his wife, and they will be one flesh. That Jesus, so it's not just Genesis, Jesus spoke clearly to it. In Ephesians 5, we are clearly told that marriage is as Christ and the church. And that is the model we have. Male, female, created for each other. Complementary in body and brain. And therefore, and I'm staying with this because today, with the whole same-sex marriage debate, this is something that we Christian churches have had to face and be very clear in how we believe. We are not judging. It's not for us to judge. It is for us to stand on conviction of the word, but have deep compassion for all our sinful desires. Hello? We are all sinful. If we are not sinful, Jesus wouldn't have had to die on the cross. So we are just inviting our homosexual and transgendered brothers and sisters, hey, come on, join us at the cross. We are all messed up. Come on, we are a core full of sinners. Come on, join us. That's what we are saying. So, what is I can be whomever I want to be? I just wanted to, we have already covered transgender, and the reality is that now we have even moved away from I can behave anyway to saying I can change my body to suit what I want to be. And yes, there are some people for whom their gender identity is so troublesome. The word dysphoria means distressing. And they just can't live without the surgery. And there is a place for it. But there are some times when it is just what we call a voluntary radicalism. And people say, I just want to do that because I feel like doing it. And we need to be very aware of that. Okay? So let's just move on, otherwise we'll be stuck here. Let's talk about falling in love, because that's something that all of you will enjoy. Some of you would have fallen in love. Some of you probably are in love right now. You remember the first time, you looked around, you looked across the room, and there she was. And you had that heart-palpitating, pupil-dilating moment, middle of winter, and you're sweating, Just chemistry. Just chemistry. I remember I told you dopamine makes you totally dopey. Serotonin levels go down. Same thing that happens in obsessive-compulsive behavior. Love is an obsession. The parts of your brain that are involved with discernment and, rational thinking are actually depressed. So you remember when, you looked at a friend who's in love and said, what does she see in him? She doesn't see. Love is blind. This is amazing mechanism that God gives you. Because if not for that, why would you go to bed with someone unless you fall in love with them? I mean, look, sexual intercourse is such a messy thing. Why would you do that unless you were full of dopamine? This is the reality. It is truly amazing. It is an emotion. It is a powerful emotion. But you know what the message you're going to hear? The emotion must be lived out in having sex. That's the message you're going to hear. That you want it, you feel that emotional pull towards someone. All that testosterone I want is now focused on one person. I want to be with you. Not I want to make love to you. Not that I want to have intercourse, but I want to get to know you. But the world message you're hearing is knowing someone means you have to be having sex with that person. This is the message you're going to be hearing. That's not what God says. In God's plan, falling in love is not about you finding satisfaction. It's not about you having the best orgasm you can get. It's about looking at your partner and saying, how can I honor and build you up? So when you're dating, it's not about looking at the boy or girl you're with and thinking, oh, you're so cute. I feel so good when I'm with you. I feel so happy. Rather, it's really about looking at that person and saying, someday you are going to be, if not my husband or wife, somebody's, or maybe you'll be a single and you'll have a wonderful life. But I want you to be the best person you can be. And I want to do whatever we can do during our dating to honor you and keep you pure. That is God's plan. That is why God gave you a place where you can have a naked and no shame relationship. That's what God meant when he said, guys, I give you marriage. So naked and no shame is a great thing. If I ask one of you to jump up there and get naked, no volunteers, why would you do that? One of two things. One is you are so perfect that nobody's going to find a single wrinkle or a saggy bit or anything on you. Everything's just as it should be. Everyone will cheer, The other reason is everyone here loves you so much that even if everything's sagging and wrinkled, they are going to say, we love you. And you trust them so much that they're not going to look at your body and then put it up on Facebook or take a picture and have it, on a Snapchat or Instagram or video or Vimeo or whatever. They love you so much and you trust them so much. See, that's what marriage is. That is why it is a naked and no shame relationship. That's why God gives us a place where we can be one flesh without ever worrying that your partner is going to let you down. It's a promise-keeping place for the best sex for life. And that's what premarital sex or extramarital sex does not offer you. That is why God has given you a place for good sex. You're all young and tight and taut and everything's in the right place. You just wait till you're 42 years married and 68 years old and things have like migrated to Melbourne. Then you would be really happy that you're with someone who goes, oh, look where that is now, and love you in spite of it. That is what the marriage is for. Next slide. Next slide, thank you. So, this we've already talked about this. Just to say, marriage is outdated. You're going to hear next one, thank you. You're going to hear that, why not try before you buy? The cohabitation. What's the problem? You got to try before you get married. How would I know I can have good sex? Well, let me tell you something. Any penis and any vagina fits. I was an anatomist before I became a sexologist. Penises do not come in micro, small, medium, large, triple X, whatever. They do not come in different sizes. Whatever they look like while they are flaccid, when erect, they are pretty much the same size. Vaginas, they'll hold on to the tiniest and still enlarge to let a baby's head out. Vaginas and penises fit. You do not have to have a fit for size before you can have sex. Let me assure you that. The statistics clearly tell us that living together, cohabitation, is not successful. It's called, and people who slide into marriage after living together are just as likely to slide out. And divorce rates and satisfaction in marriage much lower when you have cohabited and lived together before marriage. We've already talked about premarital sex and the hookup culture, and I've told you that very clearly we know that the research tells us that when you start having sex early, all the risk factors, STIs, everything is much higher. And once you get married, it's really hard to form bonds. Next slide, thank you. So I told you, you've felt desire, you've fallen in love. The third stage is what happens when you have sexual intimacy with someone. Basically, that heart palpitating, pupil dilating, falling in love doesn't last for more than about 18 months. Just enough time to get you to the altar and get married. Oh, then what? You know what? When you have sexual intimacy, you bond with that person. Different hormones, we call them cuddle hormones, oxytocin, vasopressin. Cuddling, even just, greet each other with a holy kiss, sends a little tweak of oxytocin. When you get into a group hug before going home, you'll bond with each other. When you have sexual intimacy, you get a big peak. Have an orgasm. I mean, you don't have steeples in Salvation Army halls, but if you had a steeple, it'll bring the steeple down. But you bond when you have sexual intimacy. So what happens? If you have sex with someone, you form like a super glue bond. You break up with that person. Breaking up is painful. Why is it painful? Because it's like leaving a bit of yourself and taking a bit of that person. You bond with someone else and someone else. You're forming super glue bonds, leaving bits of yourself, taking bits of that person. You end up super confused when you finally want to form a permanent relationship. And you're sitting in a therapist's room going, I so love my husband, but I can't get the image of my old boyfriends out of my brain. I so love my wife, but I keep thinking of those porn stars that I have watched. Your brain gets confused. Your brain is not made for it. God created your brain for a one-man, one-woman relationship. That is God's plan, the promise-keeping plan. If, God gives a plan that is good for our lives and for our sex lives. And not just for our lives, but for the lives of everyone in the world. And that is the reality. We are seeing so many distressed people. Depression rates are going up. Teen suicide rates are going up. You all hear every day about domestic violence and abuse and killing, self-harm in young people, girls and boys. The rates are rising. Hospitalization. Not one school in which I speak where they aren't having current issues with self-harm. This is what is happening when we live a life that will look at God's plan and say, I don't want to live that. I know better. I can marry anyone. The Christian model of marriage, that's bondage. You know, it's just bondage. You're like stuck with a person for life. How boring is that? Well, after 42 years of marriage, I can tell you it doesn't have to be boring. That's a promise. Okay, what have we got? I've even forgotten where we are. Okay, so we live in a world where heterosexual monogamous marriages are so outdated. So we've talked about most of these, but I just want to talk about, we talk about same-sex marriage. That the same-sex marriage, they say, is should be accepted. It is unfair. After all, it is all about love. If marriage is about love, so we shouldn't stop anyone from marrying because they love. Well, let me tell, how many of you are actually married? Only Nicole. She can tell you everything about it. But let me tell you something, young people. Let me tell you something. Marriage is more than sex. Marriage is not about having an emotional high. See, she's nodding because she knows. Marriage is the action of loving every day. Do you know when the day you get married, you come into the hall. It's a hall? Yeah. What do you call the co?
Yeah, we work
hall, church. Yeah. You walk in and you are the most beautiful girl in the world. Your bridegroom's in love with you, but guess what? Every man in the co is in love with you. And your bridegroom, do you get married in uniform or in regular suit?